Hi, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Crypto, a weekly look at what's driving the crypto markets and crypto giving, brought to you by the Giving Block and Shift4. My name is Nick Mikhalevsky. I'm the Senior Sales Manager here at the Giving Block, and I'm joined by my colleague Pietro Moran.
My name is Pietro Moran. I'm the Director of Crypto at Shift4 Payments. We are a leading card processing and acquiring solution that also services crypto merchants.
This is our first episode. And so let me take a few moments just to explain the kind of content that you're going to be seeing from Pietro and I over the coming weeks and months. This is something we're going to be doing every week, so please feel free to tune in, come back. This Week in Crypto is designed for our audiences across the nonprofit and payment sectors with the goal of deepening your understanding of crypto basics, crypto market insights, as well as crypto giving trends, and things that we're seeing. We'll unpack some of those more complex crypto market developments, and we'll try to make it really clear, really understandable, so that you can confidently navigate the space and make some more well-informed decisions and just have a good, solid understanding and foundation of crypto and crypto philanthropy. We'll do this episode by episode, and we just want to bring everybody from the crypto cautious to the crypto curious right into the heart of this multi-trillion-dollar industry. So a little bit about us and who we are. You can see our faces here on the screen, but really quickly, the Giving Block enables nonprofits to seamlessly fundraise with non-cash assets across crypto, stock, and donor-advised funds. And our parent company, Shift4, is a leading global payment platform that powers the top brands across every industry. So check out the show notes. You can learn a little bit more about the Giving Block and about Shift4. But with the introductions out of the way, let's shift over to the market and check in on the latest crypto prices. Pietro, over to you.
Thanks so much, Nick. I mean, nobody better to do the opening monologue, so I appreciate that. And thank you for everybody who's tuning in. This is our inaugural, as Nick mentioned. So first crypto update for those folks looking for another access point to news, updates, and maybe just a friendly face that you might recognize. So as Nick mentioned, there's a lot going on in crypto. Just to start from the top, give you a sense of where things are from a price perspective. At the time of recording, we have Bitcoin trading right around that 63,000 level. That's a little bit down from its all-time high around the low 70,000s, but up considerably this year on the back of ETF inflows. A quick note for anybody who may have missed it. Earlier this year in January, the SEC approved a few Bitcoin ETFs, which are exchange traded funds, which has allowed a new asset type, if you will, or a new wrapper for Bitcoin to be available to traditional investors. More on that later, but it's been a really great year for Bitcoin and crypto so far. Just wanted to highlight why that's happening. If we look at other assets on the list here, you have Ethereum, which is the second largest crypto asset. It's hovering right around that 3,000 level. Definitely, prices elevated from the beginning of the year, same as most of the other coins in the ecosystem, but indicative of, renewed interest and support from both the retail and institutional crowd, which is great to see. Only other thing I want to touch on in relation to the crypto prices, not that we talk about price when it comes to these assets very often, Nick, but stable coins, those are assets pegged to traditional currency. So USDC, for example, is worth $1 regardless of how many people buy it. But the key indicator that I would look at here is just to say that USDC supply, which means the amount of people interested in using it or using that token in circulation, has gone up considerably this year. We're looking at, I think, 40% growth from the beginning of the year, which is just indicative of a broader trend of people using crypto tokens, but then also tokenized dollars in this example more and more often. But that's it for a quick recap on prices, just to give you a little checkpoint on where things are going in the market. And I think we can kick it over to some news topics, right, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you have? What do you have for us this week? What's kind of top of mind? What's happening?
Great question. Two trends particularly, and you kind of alluded to this earlier. I'm more the payments guy for our team here. You're more of the nonprofit guy, which is great. So I'm a little bit biased here. One thing I wanted to highlight for our audience and for anybody listening in is can't stress enough the impact that these ETFs have had. And so you'll see here, and all of the relevant links, if you want to explore further, are going to be in the show notes for anybody listening in. So no need to take too many notes. But the topic I wanted to talk about really quickly was BlackRock seeing not just those sort of high net worth and traditional investors buying these Bitcoin ETFs and say like they're brokerage or 401k, but they're seeing pension funds and sovereign wealth funds also invest in Bitcoin ETFs. I thought that was pretty unique because having been in crypto for a few years, we haven't really had as many of those formal large scale asset managers and pension funds, sovereign wealth funds getting into this space. Maybe they nibbled on it in the past, bought a little bit here and there, and then maybe also backed off. But seeing that renewed excitement for these products is actually pretty interesting to me for a few reasons. And I think one is it's legitimizing the asset class and making this a lot more accessible for regular folks who maybe don't want to buy Bitcoin outside of, say, their traditional investing vehicle, like their brokerage or their 401k. But then, and I'd love to get your take on this too, Nick, is, we're seeing some of these folks who come into this asset class and are looking at crypto, but they tend not to enter unless they're going to be in it for a long time. Would love to get your perspective on that because, sovereign wealth funds, these folks that are managing tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, don't tend to stamp their name on something unless it's pretty legit. But would love to get your take on that too.
Yeah, that's a huge trend that we've been seeing, especially play out in the giving space as well. This whole legitimizing of the industry, the fact that the world's largest asset managers are now in the space, and the fact that, I'm not surprised that, major gifts officers will have or are having or are getting questions about renewed interest in donating crypto because, again, whether it's a high net worth individual or just an everyday person that now has access to buy these ETFs or is buying crypto directly, it's just so much more accessible. And these new regulatory approvals have just made it so much easier for people to feel comfortable getting involved. So the institutional adoption and the institutional stamp of approval and the regulatory stamp of approval is really playing out, not only in the fact that it's coinciding with an appreciation in the markets, but what we're seeing in terms of giving velocity and trends. And we'll touch on that in a second as well.
For sure. Not to lead the witness too much here. And I think I know the answer, but just for folks to get some perspective from you. Obviously, these ETFs went live in January of this year, so it's still pretty fresh in everyone's mind. But longer term, do you see potential for these institutions to now maybe work crypto giving into their more traditional platforms for giving and advising on folks who may have excess income or profits to donate? Curious to get your take on that, just because Rome wasn't built in a day, but a year or 2 years from now, is that going to be something you think is a trend?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is something that's going to play out over time. I would say the biggest benefit that we'll probably see is just donor education. I mean, when you've got these professional investors and people, who are very astute in profit-taking strategies and maximizing, profits for clients and tax accounting and all that stuff, it's really going to bring a whole new level of professional education to the space. And that is going to be great for both donors and nonprofits alike. So again, the fact that you've got a financial advisor or wealth manager who's going to be much more up to speed on crypto and their knowledge and how it could benefit from a tax perspective and how charitable contributions could be very advantageous given their situation. It's only going to help the industry when it comes to philanthropy for sure.
Yeah, I love that point. I mean, I think everything needs to start with education first and not, it's a look before you leap type of thing. I think crypto is no different because that's where I think most people feel the most need is in terms of just getting up to speed with what they think is, a comfort level that gets them excited about participating, right? And then I wanted to change gears a little bit. I know I referenced stablecoins when I was talking about kind of market updates, but I saw a story that was actually pretty interesting because when we think about traditional crypto users, right, the technology is global. And so it's borderless insofar as it goes wherever the internet is. But one of the trends that I thought was pretty interesting was that this year, $40 billion of new inflows, that just means new money coming into the crypto ecosystem, particularly for stablecoins, is coming from non-US users. And so one of the things that we think about typically with crypto is that the United States tends to be a powerhouse of adoption and folks investing in the space. That tends to kind of follow the trend of traditional capital markets, right? We have Wall Street, we have the New York Stock Exchange. Most people come to the US for capital markets. But what's interesting is we're seeing a lot of grassroots adoption across other countries and jurisdictions, which I think is, and this put my payments hat here on, is really a trend that shows people are using, tokenized dollars for more and more daily life and more things like traditional payments, everything from paying for, a coffee or booking a hotel with crypto. but also just as a savings vehicle, right? Folks that may not have easy access to dollars in their bank account can find a really easy access point via crypto. And I think that's pretty interesting just to watch that development. One of the things I wanted to kick over to you, Nick, too, is like we're seeing, similar trends from obviously US donors, but the rest of the world is also a really large market, right? The more and more folks adopt crypto, it seems like as a percentage of just like their daily transaction volume, maybe philanthropy falls into that mix as well. Obviously, I monitor it from the perspective of, well, if you're not using your credit card, but you're using stablecoins, that's pretty cool. But what do you see on that front from the stablecoin side? And maybe you've got some giving trends you could talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stable coins, point of fact, currently are the second most donated asset that we're seeing. So I think that is bearing out in the numbers exactly right. I mean, if we move on to, some giving trends that we're observing right now, I mean, no question. I mean, Bitcoin for sure is still the biggest name in the industry, and not unsurprising, we're seeing Bitcoin major gifts absolutely on fire right now. Some organizations are getting some really transformative donations with not only the run up of the crypto bull markets, but so much more conviction and so many more players in the space. Interestingly, what we're seeing April 2024 versus April 2023 is we're seeing a similar number of unique donations being made across the network. But the more interesting point is they're about 3 times larger. So volumes of donations are just getting that much bigger and chunkier, and donors have that much more to give, and they're giving pretty well. We can kind of see in the aggregate that about $2 billion has been donated to charity across all the public transactions that we can ascertain, and the ones that we know, and the ones that are reported in the news. But not unsurprisingly, with this really large increase in volume and size of donations, I mean, the average crypto gift is about 32 to 80 times larger than the average nonprofit cash gift. So again, it's something that it's a trend that we thought we would see, and it's bearing out in the numbers. And yeah, I'd encourage those nonprofits to check in on your crypto donors. They could be sitting on some sizable gains.
Yeah, I was going to say part of the price recap, and I know this is our inaugural episode, so we don't have 6 or 7 weeks of price updates to call back to. But if you look back just at the charts from January of this year onward, right, a lot of crypto assets are up 50%, 100%. And to your point, right, I have to imagine folks that are looking to maybe take some of that off the table, and with the consultation of an advisor for taxes and all other purposes, are kind of recognizing the benefit of that, which I think is really interesting. It's fun to be in this part of the crypto cycle, right? We always talk about and joke about bear markets and bull markets, but like when things are coming back, it's obviously very encouraging to see that, maybe the assets were, worth less last year and now have appreciated. But it seems like the spirit of giving hasn't gone away, is kind of what you're saying, if I'm interpreting this correctly. It's like folks are just waiting for the right time to give, as opposed to pulling back and out of the asset class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2024 is, I think, going to be the year of the asset donation, and across whether it's crypto, stock, donor advised funds, crypto has these really interesting ripple effects. So whether folks are interacting with these assets directly, or they're getting exposure through the ETF for their stock portfolio, or they're taking both of those things and putting it into a donor advised fund wrapper, immediately getting that tax write-off and then giving out those grants over time, or even all at once. It's a great kind of positive feedback loop across the entire industry. And I think we're going to see some pretty strong giving trends through the rest of 2024. And it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out in 2025, when a lot of the, if you've been holding an ETF asset, these Bitcoin ETFs for longer than a year, now you're even more tax incentivized to perhaps donate some of those shares. So 2025 might be a really interesting year. The other thing I'd say too is, to maybe close out this sort of trends and what we're seeing in the market. I mean, for the giving block itself, and the kinds of things that we see transit our rails, Q1 of 2024 was larger than Q4, which is typically when the vast majority of gifts come, like right at year end. Everybody's making those tax optimized gifts. So that was a really unique data point that we saw. And again, the acceleration of the markets and more people being able to make those gifts, they absolutely started making those gifts at the start of January. So I think we'll start to see that continue to play out as we get deeper into 2024.
I mean, that's great to see, obviously, because in my say non-philanthropy professional's opinion, I always thought giving season was at the end of the year, right? So it seems like things are moving in the right trajectory for that sort of big end of year campaign season.
Yep. And I guess maybe to shift gears a little bit, one of the other things that we want to do is sort of wrapping up kind of the market news and trends that we're seeing. We also want to make sure that in this content we're giving folks, some content that we like, content that we follow. Where do we go for our news and information? Who do we think is a really credible or interesting, talking head in the space or really good piece of content? Throughout the coming episodes, we'll talk about some of those people or sources we think are really good for our listeners to check out and read for more information. I'll kick it over to you. What are kind of the things that you're reading and what are some good, links that people should dig into for further information on crypto or the industry in general?
I've got two that came top of mind this week, and I think it's definitely better to have a leave behind, right? Instead of us being on a call for 3 hours. So I'm definitely excited about this segment, but also understand that, we can only do so much in the time we have. But the first thing I wanted to call out, actually, and I read this earlier in the week, was the Coinbase shareholder letter. So for folks that may not be aware, Coinbase is the largest US exchange for people to buy and sell crypto on. It's a publicly listed company, so it's listed on the NASDAQ. And as part of their quarterly earnings reporting, they, highlight a bunch of trends in the industry and do quite a bit to not only dive into the particulars of their own business, which, are exciting maybe if you're an investor, but I think those sort of macro trends that you see through the reporting are really interested to dive into. They talk about stablecoin growth, right? 5.5 billion, I believe, was the amount that they're holding on the platform of stablecoins, doing volumes in the hundreds of billions per quarter of trading, right? Just to show the appetite that's going on behind the scenes, or maybe those metrics that you don't follow on a day-to-day, but it's great to get a quarterly update just to see, the health of the market. I think Coinbase does a great job there. I think they also address kind of larger macro considerations or happenings in the space. So I'd invite anybody to, find the link in the show notes. It's also publicly available information since they are a public company. But just wanted to tip the cap to Coinbase and say they're doing a great job. And I think the numbers reflect that, beat on earnings, and are doing a lot of good for the industry in terms of, working with regulators, but also working to, educate and help adoption for folks that maybe they've seen crypto, but they haven't come in yet. It's one of the most, I would say easy entry points. And so if anybody wants to check out the letter, we'll link to it. And then, I'm going to sound like the stablecoins guy here, Nick, because, being in payments, we're always interested in money movement. But the second article I had for us was 5 Perspectives on Stablecoins by Nick Carter, who I think is a really eloquent writer and a great voice for the industry. He talks about in this article really kind of not myth debunking, but really taking the, say, counterpoint of why folks maybe don't like crypto or don't like stablecoins, and just really walking through a logical exercise as to why he maybe doesn't agree with that. I think it was just a really honest take on presenting two positions or juxtaposing two, viewpoints. One, is the pro, which is his, and say the counter, which are some of the other ones he found. And I think he did a really, honest treatment of both the folks that are maybe naysayers and just talking through why he thinks stablecoins are a really exciting medium of money movement. And so I'd invite anybody to take a look at that. For me, we're always excited to see, folks put out research or put out, quality writing about the space, just because I think it's a great way for folks to also, get up to speed on what's happening and maybe also see different viewpoints from the silos that we all find ourselves in sometimes. So I'd invite you to check that one out. Those are my two for the week. But Nick, what do you got on your side?
Yeah, those are great. So I chose one that kind of continues with the theme around, education in the space and the institutional entrance that we see coming in. I'd recommend, for the nonprofits that might be listening to this, check out Matt Hogan. He's the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer at Bitwise Asset Management. Bitwise is one of the leading asset managers in the crypto space. They have one of the new Bitcoin ETFs, and they're one of the first institutions that launched crypto index funds and really have done a great job bridging traditional finance with crypto. The reason that I chose to highlight Matt and the whole team at Bitwise is as absolutely phenomenal. Matt puts out a weekly CIO memo. It's a great kind of like, things that are happening in the industry. He sort of takes like his topic of the week. It's really easy to read, really accessible. And I'll also link in the show notes some more of the recent tweets that they put out. Matt was just at Barron's, a big Barron's event where they brought together thousands of the country's largest asset managers. And he's, again, educating those asset managers about crypto, about Bitcoin. And those are conversations that are going to translate into conversations that donors are going to be having with their financial advisors, with their wealth managers, or just regular investors in general. I'm still waiting for my financial advisor to get the compliance sign off for us to be talking about how that kind of changes in my mix and the things that we're going to be rebalancing. But for the platforms that are already on it, and the fact that these guys are talking to thousands of, hundreds and thousands of institutions and advisors every single week, these are conversations that are going to be starting to creep up more and more. So if you're a major gifts officer, listening in, or you're someone that's a fundraiser, these conversations could be popping up anywhere, not just on the major gift side, but even with donors that, might be getting a better education and looking to hand raise into some of these options across giving crypto, perhaps giving stocks, and putting these assets into their donor advised funds. So I'd highly recommend checking out Matt and the Bitwise team for sure.
I love that call out. I mean, it's great to see some of these folks evangelizing to, the I would say like the key stakeholders or decision makers within a lot of folks' financial, consideration or planning, right? And I think that's really how this industry grows is, again, like you said, further education. Big fan of Matt as well. So that's a great one.
Yep. Well, I think that about starts to wrap things up for, today's, inaugural episode. But, before we go, if our listeners have questions that they want to ask, to Pietro and I directly, we'll put a link in the show note. We might do a grab bag of like Q&A on future episodes. So if you've got a burning question, we said something here that kind of piqued your interest and you want to go deeper on it, not only are the show notes going to be there, but we'd be glad to answer those questions. We'll also have show notes to get started to accept crypto donations. So if you're curious on how to do that, there'll be a link to do that. And of course, links to grab more information about Shift4, about the giving block. And if you want us to serve up content straight into your inbox, there'll be an easy way to sign up for our newsletter as well. And I guess as a parting gift, one thing we do want to mention is that we are having a limited time promotion. So for those new nonprofit signups that are interested in accepting and fundraising crypto with the giving block, there is a $500 Bitcoin donation to kickstart your journey into crypto philanthropy. We'll also have a link in the show notes to click and see what that is all about. So again, on behalf of Pietro and myself, thanks for tuning in to This Week in Crypto. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.